Imagine dropping a nuclear bomb, watching the dust settle and seeing the one guy you were trying to kill.
Just sit bolt upright.
Exactly. Just sit right up in a body bag. That is the exact visceral imagery that The Boys Season 5, Episode 2 left us with.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was. And if you're anything like the thousands of fans currently screaming into the void online, that moment didn't just shock you. It completely broke your moral compass.
Oh, absolutely shattered it.
Right. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're not just doing a standard recap of Teenage Kicks. Instead, we are looking under the hood of the fan base itself.
Which is a scary place to look right now.
It really is. We've compiled this massive data set of raw, emotional, and frankly, deeply contradictory audience comments from Reddit, Twitter, all the forum threads.
And our mission here is to track exactly how your perception, the audience's psychology, is actively evolving from the premiere to this explosive second episode.
Because Episode 2 didn't fix the debates from Episode 1. It basically threw gas on the fire.
Yeah, it's a massive psychological shift. Like, when we look at the data from Episode 1, the audience was mostly debating theory. Right?
Right, like what ifs.
Exactly. But Episode 2 took those theories and turned them into gruesome reality. What we're tracking now isn't just whether people like the episode, but how their fundamental relationship with the show's universe is fracturing.
Which brings up a great question. Are you, the viewer, reacting to the show you're actually watching, or the show you expect to see based on past trauma?
That's the core of it, yeah. We are seeing viewers completely double down on their darkest impulses.
Oh, for sure.
They're reversing their opinions on main characters and, honestly, inventing entirely new frameworks just to justify what they want to happen next.
So I want to start by looking at how this episode completely flipped the chessboard. Because in the premiere, the idea of using the Supe Virus was just that. It was an idea.
A hypothetical.
Right. But at the end of Episode 2, Butcher and the team actually test this newly engineered strain in the basement of the Kicks crib. And it instantly, brutally kills the teenage heroes, Rockart and Jetstreak.
Yeah, it's not a clean death either.
Not at all. But Soldier Boy, who Butcher used as a human guinea pig, survives the blast and wakes up. Now, if you look at the audience reaction to this specific basement scene, they aren't just reacting to the plot.
No, they're having a complete meltdown over the ethics of it. The fan base has violently split into two distinct factions.
Which brings us to Category 1, the Great Moral Divide. Break down that first faction for us.
So the first faction is what the data indicates as a purely nihilistic camp. You could call them Team Scorched Earth.
I love that name, Team Scorched Earth.
Right. These are the viewers who watched teenagers die a horrific death in a basement and essentially said, good, more of that, please.
Wait, really? Just straight up endorsing it?
Straight up. They are completely siding with Butcher, and by extension, Annie, because Starlight has now publicly agreed that sacrificing all Supes is a worthwhile price to pay to stop Homelander's fascist takeover.
I was actually reading through some of these comments, and the justifications are wild. I mean, one user explicitly argued that Supes aren't a minority group being persecuted. They are, quote, corporate-produced weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, it's a huge rationalization.
Another user framed the virus not as genocide, but as, and this is a direct quote, nuclear disarmament, but the nukes are people.
Wow.
I know. That is a staggering way to rationalize mass murder.
Well, it's the ultimate escalation of the trolley problem.
Oh, break that down for a second. Because people throw trolley problem around a lot, but how does it specifically apply to the psychology of these comments?
Sure. So in the classic trolley problem, you've got a runaway train heading toward 5 tied-up people. You can pull a lever to divert it, but it'll kill one person on the other track.
Right, the classic ethics class dilemma.
Exactly. And the core of the dilemma isn't just about the math of saving 5 lives over 1. It's about the psychological burden of active versus passive harm.
Ah, I see.
Right, because if you do nothing, 5 die, but it's not directly your fault. If you pull the lever, you actively chose to end a life. In the context of The Boys, Butcher and Annie are pulling the lever. They are actively deploying a biological weapon.
So they're taking that active karma onto themselves.
Yes. And what's fascinating about Team Scorched Earth is that they have entirely bypassed the moral agony of pulling that lever. They see Homelander as an existential threat so massive that any countermeasure, no matter how grotesque, is instantly justified.
But then, you have this massive pushback from the other side of the aisle. the Team Humanity faction.
And they are very vocal right now.
Very vocal. And they're looking at Butcher and Andy's mindset as a self-destructive, toxic corruption of everything the boys were supposed to stand for. They are pointing to Huey as the last remaining moral anchor.
Right, because he's actively petitioning against the nuclear option. And we actually see that thesis play out beautifully with Mother's Milk in this episode, too.
Oh, the Countess Crow scene.
Yes. corners Countess Crow, who is literally just live streaming Vought propaganda about rounding up Starlight supporters. But the moment the cameras are off, she's just a terrified teenager trying to protect her pet crows.
Russell and Cameron.
Right. And actually spares her. Team Humanity is holding this moment up, arguing that sparing the vulnerable is the show's actual moral center, not Butcher's Scorched Earth virus.
Which brings up something really interesting I noticed in the data set. The comment sections aren't just debating the show anymore. They're using it to argue about our actual reality.
Yeah, the real-world political allegories are everywhere.
People are referencing Guantanamo Bay and ICE detention centers when discussing how Vought rounds people up. And we have to be clear here, we're just reporting what's in the data, not taking a stance on those real-world issues, but they are using them to debate how Butcher justifies his virus.
Well, fiction often acts as a sandbox, you know? It's a place for society to process incredibly heavy real-world anxieties.
It's safer.
Exactly. It is much safer, psychologically speaking, to passionately debate the ethics of a fictional Supe virus than it is to debate actual geopolitical conflicts. The audience is using the extreme reality of the boys as a Rorschach test for their own moral dread.
Because that debate over whether the virus is genocide or disarmament, that wasn't really present in episode 1.
No, it was all theoretical.
But episode 2 forced them out of the theoretical and into the visceral. It's like the atomic bomb. Once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back. You really have to wonder if viewers are unironically rooting for a mass casualty event, or if the writers just successfully backed everyone into the exact same moral corner as Butcher.
I think it's the latter. And if the audience is grappling with this massive dread about Homelander, it naturally shifts how they want to see him defeated. Which brings us to category 2.
The fate of Homelander. This is where the data gets genuinely surprising to me. Historically, for 4 seasons, the audience has been bloodthirsty. They wanted Homelander to suffer a brutal, violent, graphic death.
Yeah, they wanted him ripped apart.
Right. But episode 2 seems to have completely changed their minds about what a satisfying ending looks like. The opinions didn't just evolve, they fully flipped.
They really did. The prevailing fantasy in the comment threads has evolved from execution to ultimate humiliation.
Humiliation. That's a huge shift.
It is. In episode 1, we saw A-Train mock Homelander right before dying, calling him an empty suit without his powers. In episode 2, that thread is pulled further.
Oh, when we see Homelander visibly terrified that Soldier Boy might fry the Compound V right out of his blood.
Exactly. The audience is taking those breadcrumbs and sprinting with them.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
The top-voted comments aren't asking for his head on a spike anymore. They want him to survive, but they want him fully depowered. Stripped of his godhood, thrown into a maximum security prison as a normal, aging, frail human.
Left entirely at the mercy of the ordinary people he spent his entire life torturing.
Right. One commenter compared it to the villain Ozai in Avatar, The Last Airbender, taking away the one thing that makes him special. But for that fantasy to work, the fans have constructed this massive, intricate theory pulling lore from across the entire franchise.
Including the Gen V spinoff. They're calling it the V1 theory.
Okay, yes. Explain the V1 theory, because this is fascinating.
So the idea posits that the original older Supes, specifically Soldier Boy and Stormfront, weren't given the modern Compound V. They were injected with an original prototype formula, V1.
And what does V1 supposedly do?
It grants true immortality and, crucially, makes their blood completely immune to Butcher's new virus.
Oh, wow. Which would perfectly explain the cliffhanger. It explains why Soldier Boy survived the virus blast in the basement and woke up in the body bag.
Exactly. And if Homelander figures that out, it explains his psychology perfectly moving forward. He's terrified of aging, and he's terrified of the virus.
So naturally, he's going to desperately seek out this V1 formula to immunize himself.
It's a highly logical reading of the breadcrumbs the writers are dropping.
I hear that, but I have to push back on the audience here.
Yeah.
Because there is a glaring, massive plot hole in this prison fantasy.
Oh, the Kimiko logic.
Yes.
Yes.
The fans want him depowered and left alive in a cell. But we have already seen, unequivocally with Kimiko's storyline, that if a Supe is depowered, You can literally just re-inject them with Compound V and they get their powers back.
Yep, they just bounce right back.
So if Homelander is sitting in a normal human prison, what is stopping someone like the Deep or just some Vault loyalist from flying over the rec yard and dropping a syringe of V at his feet? Are the fans willfully ignoring the show's established biological rules?
They are absolutely ignoring it. And the psychological mechanism behind that is called motivated reasoning.
Motivated reasoning. How does that work in this context?
Well, motivated reasoning occurs when the human brain prioritizes emotional safety or narrative catharsis over cold, objective logic. When a person desperately wants a specific outcome to be true, in this case, the ultimate psychological punishment of a deeply traumatic villain, their brain will subconsciously filter out any facts that contradict that outcome.
So they just forget about Kimiko's arc entirely.
Pretty much. The audience wants the emotional payoff of seeing Homelander bullied by normal humans so intensely, they are willing to completely shatter the internal consistency of the show to get it. The emotion is driving the logic.
That is fascinating. So subconsciously, the audience knows Homelander isn't going to die anytime soon. He has massive narrative plot armor.
Right.
And if you have all this pent-up, unresolved anxiety about the villain, and you know you can't take it out on him yet, you naturally transfer that anxiety onto the characters who actually are vulnerable.
Which perfectly segues into Category 3. The absolute state of panic surrounding the side characters right now.
Specifically, Frenchie and Kimiko.
The sentiment analysis for Frenchie and Kimiko is incredibly messy. Like, coming out of Season 4, which had a highly criticized arc for Frenchie, fans were already deeply skeptical.
Yeah, opinions were already pretty low.
Right. Now, in Episode 2, Frenchie and Kimiko finally reconcile romantically. They have this long-awaited, passionate moment, but the audience reception is completely fractured.
A huge chunk of the negativity is zeroing in on the writing quality itself. There's one specific line of dialogue from Kimiko that the internet is just tearing apart.
Oh, I know the one.
She tells Frenchie, quote, "My vagina's tingly and damp."
The reaction to that line was visceral. Fans found it intensely cringeworthy and completely out of character.
They really hated it.
They are aggressively blaming the new plot device for it. The idea that Kimiko learned to speak by watching TikTok, they think it's ruining her communication style.
I mean, I totally get why it pulls you out of the immersion. If you have a character who has listened to and understood complex language her entire life, it doesn't make sense that she would suddenly start speaking in bizarre, terminally online internet catchphrases.
Right, just because she started vocalizing.
Exactly. It feels cheap.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting to me is the other side of the reaction. Because even the viewers who defend the dialogue, who are genuinely happy these two traumatized characters are finally together, they aren't actually enjoying the romance.
No, because they realize the writers are actively torturing them. This is where we see audience behavior fundamentally shift. They aren't watching a narrative unfold anymore. They are hunting for death flags.
Yes, death flags. It's like the entire fan base has turned into a giant firm of insurance actuaries.
That is a great way to put it.
They are sitting on their couches, crunching the statistical probability of a character's gruesome demise based entirely on narrative economy. When Frenchie talks about running away with Kimiko to an uninhabited island, the audience universally clocked that as a guaranteed death sentence.
Because in television writing, extreme happiness is almost always the prelude to extreme tragedy.
100%.
When the audience becomes hyper-aware of these tropes, it changes the entire genre of the show. It stops being a story you passively absorb and becomes an interactive, high-stakes metagame.
You're no longer asking what will happen next.
Right. You are asking, how are the writers going to punish me for caring?
And the leaks are just throwing gasoline on that fire. I saw this all over the dataset. People are obsessed with the leaked title for episode 7.
The Mother's Milk one?
Yeah, it's supposedly called The Frenchman, the Female, and the Man Called Mother's Milk, which is a direct callback to a very famous, very tragic arc in the original comic books. The audience is absolutely convinced that all three of those characters are doomed.
And they're tying it directly into MM's ongoing alcoholism arc in this episode.
Right, where he explicitly talks about accepting the fact they'll never see his family again. It's so depressing.
It is. And when viewers become insurance actuaries, it entirely heightens the dread. You're bracing for impact at all times. But for a show that relies heavily on psychological tension, forcing the audience into a constant state of hypervigilance is exactly the intended emotion. They want you to feel fundamentally unsafe.
Unsafe is the perfect word. And, when you are kept in a perpetual state of anxiety, you need a release valve. Which brings us to Category 4, the show's signature tone.
The bizarre and the grotesque.
Exactly. This wild, whiplash-inducing blend of juvenile, grotesque satire and deeply haunting psychological horror. Episode 2 gave us two prime exhibits of this dichotomy, and the audience is wildly divided on how they handle it. Exhibit A, the soup known as Rock Hard.
Oh boy. So Rockhard is a 30,000-pound man made entirely of granite. He's completely immobile, communicates through a text-to-speech machine.
Kind of ironic given what we do.
True. And the show reveals that he literally goons himself into a mountain of rock while watching volcano pornography.
I mean, it is the absolute pinnacle of frat house, 12-year-old boy humor. And looking at the comments, a lot of fans are rolling their eyes. They're finding it exhausting.
It's the same reaction they had to Ashley's new power.
Oh, where she develops a second, highly critical face on the back of her head.
Yeah, completely mirroring Professor Quirrell from Harry Potter.
Right. One commenter dubbed it Lady Voldemort. And the audience is either laughing out loud or just groaning at the sheer, stupid absurdity of it.
It's very polarizing.
But then, in the exact same episode, you have Exhibit B. And the tone shift gives you absolute whiplash.
Exhibit B is the scene with Homelander in the cryo chamber.
Right, after he wakes Soldier Boy up.
Yeah. After the chaos settles, there's this lingering, quiet shot. Homelander is standing in the empty pod, holding the heavy restraint belt that was wrapped around Soldier Boy's midsection while he was frozen, and he deeply, desperately sniffs it.
The comments on this scene are completely bifurcated. On one hand, you have fans leaning into the grotesque humor we just talked about. They're asking, is this an incest joke referencing the comics?
They're treating it as just another punchline.
Exactly, just a show pushing sexual taboos. But on the other hand, you have fans engaging in incredibly deep, empathetic psychological analysis of a mass murderer.
They're looking at this scene and seeing a tragic display of mommy and daddy issues from a lab-grown sociopath, someone who is desperately yearning for a father figure.
One commenter in the dataset made a brilliant comparison. They likened it to a viral video where an internet personality was caught secretly sniffing a chair after a controversial hyper-masculine influencer got up from it.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's this desperate, pathetic attempt to absorb the virility or the essence of someone they view as a dominant male figure. It recognizes that Homelander isn't just evil. He is profoundly, irreparably broken.
He drinks breast milk because he lacked a mother, and now he's sniffing a frozen, sweaty restraint belt because he lacks a father.
It totally reminds me of Harry Harlow's famous monkey experiments from the 1950s.
Well, maybe that's the one with the wire mothers, right?
Yes. For those who aren't familiar, Harlow took infant monkeys away from their mothers and gave them a choice between two artificial surrogates. One was a wire mother made of bare, cold wire that had an attached bottle providing milk.
Okay, so it provided literal sustenance.
Right. The other was a cloth mother, covered in soft terry cloth that provided absolutely no food. The monkeys overwhelmingly chose to cling to the cloth mother, even when they were starving.
Because the mammalian brain is hardwired to seek out tactile comfort.
Exactly. Emotional security over literal sustenance. Homelander is basically a traumatized lab rat looking for a cloth mother. And because his world is so devoid of actual love, he's trying to find that comfort in a frozen belt. It is pathetic, but it is deeply uncomfortably real.
And that juxtaposition explains the show's alchemy perfectly. If the series were only trauma, if it was just Homelander's profound isolation and the grim reality of a biological weapon, it would be unbearably bleak.
It would just be too much.
The humor, no matter how juvenile, is the spoonful of sugar that makes the psychological horror digestible. You're laughing at Ashley's second face, your guard drops, and then the writers hit you with the profound, quiet tragedy of Homelander's broken psyche.
The absurdity disarms you so the horror can actually penetrate. Let's pull all of this together, because the evolution we're seeing from the audience between Episode 1 and Episode 2 is massive. They have shifted from being passive consumers of television to active, hypervigilant participants in the psychological thriller.
The lines between right and wrong are entirely blurring. And not just in the fictional universe, but in the actual Reddit threads.
Oh, definitely.
The audience is bracing for a bloodbath. They are calculating death flags. They are tracking complex V1 immunity theories to explain plot holes because their motivated reasoning demands it.
And furiously debating the semantics of genocide versus disarmament.
Right. The theoretical debates of the premiere have been replaced by a visceral need for control.
Which leads me to a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we wait for the next episode. We talked heavily about how the fans are overwhelmingly rooting for a Homelander to be stripped of his powers.
The humiliation fantasy.
Right. They don't just want him dead. They want him left helpless, terrified, locked in a normal prison, and at the absolute prolonged mercy of the ordinary people he spent his life torturing. They want ultimate vindictive retribution.
It's a dark desire.
It is. And think about the psychology of that desire. If you, as a viewer, are actively craving that level of prolonged, agonizing psychological torture for another living being, well, doesn't that mean Butcher's toxic, corrupted worldview has already infected you?
Well, that's a chilling thought.
If you are rooting for the cruelest possible outcome, have you become the exact type of monster you tune in every week to watch get defeated? Keep tracking the chaos, everyone. As this season unfolds, it is crystal clear that the real psychological thriller isn't just happening on the screen, it's happening in our own heads. Thanks for diving deep with us.